It's a huge, huge win for the students and the protesters, especially the youth of Bangladesh. After months and months of protest, they finally managed to force Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to step down and flee from the country. Bangladesh's army chief, General Waqar uz Zaman, has confirmed her resignation and has said an interim government will be formed. He has also asked the protesters to end the protest now and return to their houses. Massive milestone for Bangladesh. Remember, Sheikh Hasina has been the Prime Minister of Bangladesh for the better part of the last 2 decades. And joining me at this moment is Mr. Sultan Muhammad Zakaria, who's co founder of Bangladeshi Diaspora for Justice and Accountability. Mr. Zakaria, only once in a lifetime does a movement get exactly the result it wanted to achieve. Your thoughts?
First of all, thank you for having me, and I congratulate my countrymen and those actually the fallen heroes. We lost too many brothers and sisters in the span of 2 weeks. So it's really great, really for all of us who has been fighting for their democratic rights for the last decade or so. And I know it sounds a bit um, um, not jubilant, but I think in my view that the only thing constant in life is the fight for your rights, and that you will never stop doing that. So I see it's just a stoppage that we needed to be in order to build the country from here. um, uh, and I I hope that our friends and allies across the region will help us rebuild our democratic institutions and norms and etc. And India has a huge democratic tradition, and we look forward to working to go together in whatever capacity our two countries and two people can afford to. So I think it's a win for Bangladeshi people, but it's also win for the people who loves democracy and their rights.
Since we are speaking about democracy, Mr. Zakaria, I would like to ask you one very particular question. Right now, it's the interim government which is in place, and it's being headed by the army. And in such a situation, do you think that the protest or the movement is now over, or it should continue till that moment when elections are announced and a democratically elected government is in place?
Good question, and I think this is a $1 million question now. I have happened to be connected with some of the student leaders, but I think the students who led this movement, they are very smart, sharp. They surprised me with their acumen, with their forethought, and I firmly believe that this is not over, because we will be heading towards a transition now, and the transition will take, I suppose, some time, because we have a lot of backlog to clear. Especially the constitution has been a big issue for some time. So I suppose there will be some discussion about how to rewrite the constitutions, and then you know that all the institutional architecture has been personalized, has been corrupt, has been I mean they are just in a complete ruin now. And I
So, if
think
I may ask, it's early days, I understand, but what would be the transitional roadmap look like? What would it entail, and who are going to be the key stakeholders here?
um, I mean, I can offer you some insights from my own understanding, but of course, the players on the ground, they will play the role in whatever outcome that we will see in the coming days. But what I see is that there is a new social contract, and it's like huge consensus has been built across party line. That country cannot go back where it was on August 4. So the legal architecture, the constitutional architecture, to change all of these things, it will take huge time. But of course, no transitional government can achieve all of them. So I anticipate that a unity government will take over for at least for a few years. That's my hunch. And after clearing all the messes, a new constitution will be rewritten, and then a referendum will follow. And based on the new rules or the new social contract included in the constitution, a new election will follow. I cannot tell you the exact timeline, but that's what I envision, that this should happen this way.
So there is still some time between now and the democratic election process to electoral process to begin. While of course referendum is something which is going to be a part of it.
Yeah.
So this brings me to the other question now. Like, what would be the students' role? Students have been very active in this protest, and in a way, they have been the harbinger of change here. So, what would be their role? Would it now would who would fill in this void if the protests are to end? And what would be the structure of the new setup? The who are the key stakeholders here? Because
I mean,
Sheikh Hasina has always been saying that this is less of the students and more of the opposition coalition and other forces which has been acting.
I mean, she said whatever she wanted to say because she led a campaign of mayhem and carnage and killed hundreds of thousands of people. So I don't want to name her here. I don't want to refer what she said. She's completely irrelevant in the national or public life from now on. And the least Bangladeshi can do is to look back. Um, what I think is democracy is a journey, but unfortunately, I mean, after 1991, Bangladesh was one step ahead, one step moving, one step ahead, and two step backwards. But what changed was in 2014 when the election completely turned into a sham exercise. And then 2018 is even worse. The election was stolen before even single vote was cast, and then we saw the repeats in 2024. So we have like a 10 years of anti-democratic uh, uh, regime that ruled the country, and the norms that it came along. It will definitely take Herculean task to instill and to, I mean, to change all this democratic architecture. I mean, just to give you an example, the election commission, the judiciary, who is supposed to offer the recourse between the executive malfeasance or the legislative overshoot, right? But then the judiciary just played along what the executive said, and the election commission, which is supposed to conduct a free and fair election, is just acted as an arm, as an extended arm of the executive branch. So all these things has to be thoroughly, I think, reviewed, and
Looked into and reviewed.
yeah, and then once people have a sense of confidence that look, these institutions can deliver, and then what happened will not happen, at least reasonable expectation that this cannot happen. I think until that we will see, I mean, all of us would be happy to give whatever the transition government is that time. And the students role, I speak to some of them, I told them that don't be part of the power, be the catalyst of change. So they can remain outside the ambit of the power, but still they can force the change. They can be the catalyst. They can still mobilize. They can still organize, keep up the pressure. I think that's where the students are going to play more prominent role
Absolutely.
in the coming days.
Mr. Zakaria, there's one thing which comes in, like since 2014, all of us who've been watching Bangladesh very closely, and especially for all of you who've been living there or you've been part of the movements in different ways, we've seen a lot of protests, sporadic protests happening from time to time. So from 2014 to now 2024, it's been roughly 10 years. And in these 10 years, there has been numerous other protests. So what exactly happened this time that everything came together and Sheikh Hasina was forced to leave the country?
Um, I used to say I teach graduate students about the government systems, and I used to tell my students that it's the dictatorial trap. All dictators at certain point are entrapped. They made mistakes and they cannot see their blind spots. So what Sheikh Hasina did over the last 10 years is brutally suppressing any dissents. And I have never seen in my lifetime, and I spoke to many people who are older than me. They have also not seen their life, that how brutally Sheikh Hasina suppressed the protesters, how randomly she allowed the security forces to shoot at the protesters. So protesting during Sheikh Hasina's regime is you are risking your life, you are taking bullets. That's the high risk possibility. She was able to carry out that brutality because onto BNP and Jamaat and any political parties, and because BNP and Jamaat has their own legacy, they had their own crimes uh, of their own. So I don't believe that they were able to command much respects of the mass people. So what
So if
happened?
you, but what exactly changed for Sheikh Hasina? She's seen she was someone. Her father was the one whose father of Bangladesh was the architect of Bangladesh's freedom. She also has been on that role for the longest time, even in during from 1986 to 91 when her protest days were there, and when she got elected in 1991. But off late, what has changed after, say, 2008, after she came back to power after being completely elected to power in 2008? What changed after that?
Um, I think um, she made a huge mistakes. I mean, if you look at the history of the Bengal Delta, that's how I refer it for the last 300 years since the British came here. The origins of protests, the rebellions against the British, and then the bringing that around the Iron Man Ayub Khan to the army dictators Ershad. So Bangladesh has a lot of history to bringing that down big dictators. So it's really unwise on the part out of her to take that route, that I can disenfranchise people and then I can still rule this land. I think that's the biggest setback, that she miscalculated. People gave her time, not because that she was popular, she was doing well, but because any dictators has a maturity time. The kind of brutality that she inflicted, people needed to adjust, because this time you see she unleashed the same ferocious force. In the span of 2 weeks, she killed nearly 1,000 people. It's unprecedented, unimaginable. But this time, people said enough is enough. So I think it's just the lack of history lesson, and also lack of understanding of this Bengal Delta, that you should not rule an explosive population like this by force, brute force. You can get away for 1 year or 2 year, 3 year. That's okay. That's your lifetime as a dictator. But you should never expect that you will get away.
But let's take a macro view of this. Since the formation, since 1971, since Bangladesh's independence, India and Bangladesh has always shared more or less a warm relationship. There have been ups and downs, but more or less it's been a warm relationship between the two countries. Now, with Sheikh Hasina leaving the chair, an interim government coming in, no one knows who will actually rule Bangladesh a year down the line. So, how do you think the Bangla India relation is going to be impacted?
I mean, one thing that I always
Because
tell.
I saw your social media profile as well, where you've been actively asking that India should cooperate, India should not look on the other side, if India should not, India should be a part of this movement and ensure a smooth transition. Now that it has happened, and in the way she's come to India, it appears that there has been some India hand. What is it that you think will now happen between Bangla India relations?
First thing first, I think Bangladesh and India, and I mean, as a famous ad, they say that you can change everything, but you cannot change your neighbor, right? So Bangladesh and India's fates are intertwined unless something happened to our borders. And the two people share a lot commonality than not, right. And I applaud the people of India, especially we saw many protests in Calcutta and other parts of India in support of our students movement. I think to me the single common denominator is that the people's rights are constant. As I mean, I'm repeating this. I know people in India have been fighting for their rights against the tyranny, against the system, against the injustices, and people in Bangladesh will do the same. And this fight will never end. So I think if the two people can look at each other and share this common values, look, what is constant is your right and my right, and if you can build on that, and if you can have a mutual respect on that, I think India it has nothing to fear of what Bangladesh transpires into. Unless India makes blunders, I mean, you have history of making blunders across borders. I hope that they do not repeat that. Bangladesh is not a hostile country. Bangladeshi people will not be hostile, but the relationship has to be built on mutual respect, and
Absolutely.
shared interest.
Right, right. So one last question. There has been the presence of army throughout. In fact, it was in a way the silent support of the army, which many say has led to the exit of Sheikh Hasina so early into the protest. And we've seen army saying clearly that we will not target our citizens, we will only guard the institutions. So in the roadmap ahead, how do you see the army's role as in the government, and how do you see how they have performed their role so far when the movement was on?
That's a very good question. I think since army has I would say, I mean, as you know, the state has the monopoly of violence, and within the state, army has the biggest higher power force. So they will be the critical actor in this transition, and we will all watch closely. Our students will keep their pressure, will keep their eyes, so that we remain on the path of democracy and rights. No one should usurp the opportunity that handed over to us by the sacrifices of these young men and women. I believe that the army will play a constructive role. And just to correct you, one thing, that army initially, when Sheikh Hasina deployed army, she already killed enough number of people, almost like 250 plus people killed, and that itself is unprecedented in the history of this country. Even Pakistani military Ajanta did not kill this number of protesters except the 71 war. So she crossed all the boundaries. And when army deployed, some army officers, um, they they shot at protesters. Some people got killed, and there was a huge pushback. both at the UN peacekeeping mission, because hundreds of thousands, I mean, the 10 million plus Bangladeshi live abroad. And they created extraordinary campaign I have seen in my life. They put the extraordinary pressure on the UN. All the institutions have been engaged, and they started the remittance shutdown campaign, which is almost the lifeline of the country. So the combined pressure of people from all over the world forced army leadership to rethink: should they go and fight their own people, or should they? So, what army did, they didn't help the protesters. What they said, that we will remain neutral, we will not shoot at our brothers, and that did the trick. In Dhaka, to today, there are almost like 10 million people on the street. How many people you are gonna kill? So that's an impossible scenario. No army can rescue someone who is surrounded by 10 million people on the street. So army just made a sane call, a reasonable call, and I applaud them. They made the good call that, look, this is over. If we
Well,
go,
when a movement kind of works out, it's essentially when all the factors come in together, all the stakeholders play their part. I know I said it was one last question, but one question I would like to ask before I close this is, what will happen to the Hindu minorities who are who reside in Bangladesh? This is a question which is being talked about. In fact, this is something which a lot of people from the current, like the Awami regime, has also mentioned that if they go, then it's going to be a difficult time for the minorities. So, uh, is there an assurance that things will be fine, or is there an expectation that there's chance that the fundamental elements will take this over and it will mean a difficult time for the minorities living in Bangladesh?
I appreciate you bringing these aspects of the crisis. I think um, I think few of very active and vibrant supporters in this movement came from our Hindu brothers and sisters. And this movement was not in any means, by in any means, a an ethnic or religious fault line existed here. This was like unanimously, all across, people from all walks of life join this movement. The concerns of minority safety and security is, I think, it's for every majoritarian democracy has to deal with, including India, including the United States I live in. Because of the nature of the democratic institutions and culture of the majoritarian nature, we always have to fight constantly and vigilantly to protect the rights of our minority brothers. Be it Hindu, be it any other religion, be it any other ethnic formations, it's a duty. If you are a democratic, if you love uh, the democracy and human rights, if you are bound by its rules, then it's the bare minimum that you protect the vulnerable community in your social society. If you don't do that, you slip away, you fall off from the democratic commitment. And one last thing is that, uh, and many people in India have this misconception that, personally, I would want to mention that Sheikh Hasina regime victimized in the minority community more than any group, and that's from my experience in my lifetime. They abuse these groups to for their electoral benefits and therefore their legitimacy, etc. But if you independently do a research, I am a researcher myself. I do not have any background whatsoever in any connection whatsoever with the fundamentalist. I can vouch that the number of attacks on the minority for the last 10 years, if you systematically study, and we have done that, majority, overwhelming majority, 70-80% of them are done by the thugs of the ruling party. and Sheikh
Right.
Hasina protected that. Sheikh Hasina used that for her benefit. So it should be it's an illusion that Sheikh Hasina protected minority. So in new
Correct.
Bangladesh, and I really appreciate you bringing up this issue. We have to keep reminding ourselves, like you, as our counterpart, you have to keep reminding yourself that minority in your country is as safe as minority in our country is safe. It's a shared fight. It's not one-sided fight. And anything happen across the border affects us, and anything happens here affects you. So we have a joint responsibility to protect both of our minorities, Hindus here, Muslims there, or whatever religions are there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Zakaria. It was great talking to you and understanding what the dynamics of a new Bangladesh would be. The nation almost got a rebirth, as many are saying right now, because Sheikh Hasina has left. An interim government would be formed, and it will go through its processes, looking after the institutions, and in some time, a new democratic setup is likely to take shape. These are difficult times, of course. Vigilance should not go down, is what Mr. Zakaria has also been telling the students. But yes, congratulations once again for because not often a movement actually achieves the target it sets out to go.
Thank
Thank you.
you.